Welcome back, everybody, to my annual October ranking series. This year I'm counting down my 31 favorite horror movies from the 2010s. We have some underrated gems for the next couple spots, and these are movies that I think deserve, that not enough people are talking about, and I think more people should check them out. So I'm looking forward to talking about these next two. So at the number 8 spot, we have the very underrated Excision. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know how much I love Descent into Madness movies. For me, they are some of the most suspenseful horror movies, or any genre, because they can be in other genres, but Descent into Madness movies are some of the most suspenseful movies to me. Because you're just watching someone lose their mind, and you know at some point something bad's going to happen. They're going to do something bad. It's not a question of that if they're going to do it. You just know it's going to happen, and you're wondering when they're going to do it and what they're going to do. Excision is one of the best Descent into Madness movies. And a very, very underrated horror movie from the 2010s. So we have AnnaLynne McCord as Pauline, a high school student, a disturbed high school student with mental issues. She has psychological problems and she needs psychological help. But she's not really getting it. And the reason she's not getting that psychological help is because she has a little sister named Grace who suffers from, I want to make sure I say this right, cystic fibrosis, which is a horrible disease that affects the lungs and other various body parts, but it's a bad condition. Pauline has a perfectionist mother and a father who's just kind of there. And her parents tend to give all their attention to her little sister, who has a physical ailment. And as a result, Pauline's psychological issues aren't really getting a lot of attention. Now, in addition to having psychological issues, Pauline also has a surgery fetish. She has a lot of these creepy fantasies and dreams about surgery mixed with sexual elements and stuff like that. It's really odd and really nasty, but in a fun way. I'm twisted, I know, but anyway. As a result of that, her and her mother are a bit at odds with each other, and like I said, her little sister Grace tends to get all the attention because of her physical ailment. And as a result, Pauline's psychological issues aren't really noticed as much. And we're just watching her life as this situation continues throughout her family. And it eventually, I'm not going to spoil it here, but this is a horror movie, so you know it's going to go bad. It eventually builds to a point where Pauline does something. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to try to be as vague as possible in this review. So what we have here, yes, it is a Descent into Madness movie. So basically what we have here is a psychological horror movie mixed with a dark comedy, a very dark comedy, and elements of body horror, you could say, because of Pauline's fantasies. But yeah, it is a mix of this, but it is basically, for the most part, it's a character study of this young high school student with these mental issues and the surgery fetish, trying to live her life and, trying to deal with the fact that she is kind of losing her mind. It is, you could technically call it a slow burn, but I mean, it's not fast-paced, but it's good slow pacing. Like I always say, I never compare fast pacing and slow pacing. I compare good pacing and bad pacing. And this is an example of good slow pacing, but there's a lot of creepy stuff in here and a lot of alarming stuff in here. And one of the things I find fascinating about this movie is it's a horror movie that doesn't really have a villain. There's no real antagonist in this movie. I mean, technically there are, like, high school bullies and stuff that you could say, oh, those are the bad guys, but they're not really the villains of this movie. The villain or antagonist, you could technically say, is the situation. Yes, Pauline and her mom don't get along very much, and you can tell they're very different people. But Pauline's mom isn't a bad person. Like, a lot of her attention goes towards Grace, and that's because Grace has a physical ailment, a very bad physical ailment. Look into cystic fibrosis. It is, like, it's an intense disease in many ways. But anyway, and so they are at odds with each other, but the mother tries at certain points, and there are points where she gets frustrated in a way that you can understand families and parents and, you know, all these family members getting frustrated with each other when dealing with these kinds of situations. Like, there are times where Pauline's mother feels overwhelmed and she says something that she shouldn't say. And not condoning her words in this, but you kind of say, okay, she is overwhelmed with this whole situation with her family and she exploded and said something that she shouldn't have. Not condoning her actions, but you kind of understand. And Pauline isn't really a bad person. She just has these deep psychological problems, and that's what I'm talking about, where there really isn't an antagonist in this movie. The villain of the whole situation is this... The villain of the whole movie is this situation, and that's fascinating to me, to have a horror movie that doesn't really have a bad guy.
No wonder all her friends have fallen by the wayside. You're fucking crazy to want to spend time with her. I have tried and tried, and it is impossible to love her.
But it's disturbingly fascinating to watch her journey throughout this film, and the utter tragedy around the whole situation. You know, because this is a commentary about how physical ailments tend to get more recognition than mental ailments and mental illness and stuff like that. Mental illness can, in many ways, be swept under the rug because they focus so much on physical ailments and physical things and physical tragedies in this world that people dealing with mental deficiencies don't really get the care they need. You know, people, like, always try to ignore the mental issues, and, you know, like, there are plenty of people in this country suffering from that, and everyone tries to look the other way and ignore it and focus on other tragedies, which is, saying it again, I'm sorry for repeating myself, which is very tragic. There are many people in this world that need mental help. And if they had gotten the help they needed, things might have turned out differently in many situations. And that is the case with Pauline, because I know it's a mild spoiler, but I don't think it's that much of a surprise that she eventually does something bad. That's what happens in these kinds of movies. And you just stop and think that if she had gotten the help she needed, if their parents recognized that she needs some kind of psychological help and they were able to get it for her, things might have turned out different. But at the same time, you can kind of understand, because her little sister is going through this horrible physical illness and tends to get all the attention because of it. You know, it's just an all-in-all very tragic situation. And I don't want to spoil the ending, I'm not going to, but the ending is one of the most heartbreaking endings I've ever seen in a horror movie.
I'd accept full responsibility for all my actions, but let's face it, you gave me hormones.
Excision is such an underrated movie from the 2010s, and I recommend everybody check it out. This is one of those movies that that could make for a good movie night, but for the right kind of people. I mean, this is probably a movie that isn't really for everybody. I wouldn't say it's an overly disturbing movie, especially compared to other movies I've talked about on this channel. Maybe not even other movies on this list, but I mean, you do have to kind of be in the right frame of mind to watch the movie like this, because it does go in some very depressing directions. Very interesting directions, but very depressing directions. So it could make for an interesting movie night, but for the right people, and do keep in mind that you are getting into a very depressing movie here. But I do recommend that people check out Excision, because I think it is a very underrated movie that more people need to check out. I love Descent into Madness movies, and Excision, for me, is one of the best Descent into... one of the best Descent into Madness movies. Fumbling with my voice. I have the most professional channel on YouTube.
I'm under the impression if I ask you to forgive me, you kind of have to. Which is
It's pretty awesome. I'm just gonna say. If I'm off base, let me know. Otherwise, I'm gonna move forward as planned.